That didn't happen this morning. That didn't happen this morning. Okay, so now we have progress. So, Rob, our director, had asked me to, on a Friday evening, once every time I'm in Perth, so about every 6 weeks, to give a talk, more like not a teaching, but more open talk thing. Everyone's on this side, so I can just look this way. So I came up with this Fridays of the Future, and I'll explain why that topic, if you don't know already. But, further contemplation about how best to have these series of seminars every 6 weeks or so is to have it on a socially engaged topic, like relevant, real in the world today, because it also feels comfortable for me and resonates with my own connection and journey into the Dharma, that I was quite involved in a lot of different activism as a younger person, and really taken by socially engaged Buddhism. When someone gave me a book, and it had it was an Australian book, I think, different stories of different socially engaged Buddhists, and I found that really inspiring. Of course, who stands out as a sort of prime example, Thich Nhat Hanh, from the times of the Vietnam War up till the present, as a really sort of vocal advocate. But of course, we also have someone like His Holiness the Dalai Lama. So I thought it's really about different ways of engaging compassion in action. Like, I don't know if there's a Malenuna in Sydney. There's one of the centres is called Socially Engaged Buddhism, or Centre of Socially Engaged Buddhism, and they always just have a talk every Wednesday night from different people involved in different things and so forth. So it's quite inspiring. So it's really about compassion in action, so different themes in relation to this for us to think about from a Dharma perspective, yes. But I was particularly thinking as Mahayana Buddhists, where we're saying, for the welfare of all sentient beings. My question arises, what am I doing right now for the welfare of all sentient beings? So just saying. So to give you a bit of context for this, I ordained in a bit more context. It's a bit more context. So basically, this Fridays for the Future, because when Rob said, could you give a Friday night talk? And I was looking on His Holiness' website, and then I had a link, Fridays are for the Future. And I thought, oh, well, Fridays, it's a Friday talk. I mean, my thinking was as simple as that. But then, of course, when you unpack that, it's the inspiration His Holiness has for, and right behind, or admiration, sorry, for Greta Thunberg and her Fridays are for the Future movement and so forth. So it's a whole environmental movement. So we're talking here about global warming, and which is right here and now. And, at some point in the world, we changed it to climate change because we didn't want to think about warming. But our experience tells us otherwise, doesn't it? But anyway, I'm not getting into the politics of it. I'm trying not to get into the politics of it. I am a nun. I'm, supposed to be not involved in any, political parties, a different thing to the politics of the world in terms of what's happening. So context, I ordained, when I ordained, it was just before my 50th birthday, or not long before my 50th birthday. I just sort of didn't know when I was going to be ordained. You don't need the whole story. I knew it was coming. Right? So it was before my 50th birthday. And so my friends would, I went to their 50th birthday parties. They were planning my 50th birthday party. And then all of a sudden I become a nun. And how are we going to celebrate your birthday? I have some very dear friends. How are we going to celebrate your birthday? Not only, of course, I ordained and then was living in the 8 Mahayana precepts, which was not eating after midday, not eating, certain foods, that even if I was to say, let's go out for lunch, that would be a trauma in itself to avoid those foods. It's just like, what are you going to have? A bit of salad somewhere? Even that comes with a dressing with things you can't have. So it was just too hard, right? And then at that same time, I saw on the blog of FPMT that Lama Zopa Rinpoche had gone to see An Inconvenient Truth. And I thought, well, if Rinpoche went to see it, that's what we're going to do. So I said to my dear friends, it was on in Sydney at the time, I said, well, how about we go and see Inconvenient Truth as my birthday celebration? And they gladly accepted. And I said, we can have a cup of tea afterwards. Okay, so yeah, so anyway, so of course, you know, the messaging around climate change and global warming and so forth was, you know, I mean, I find it hard to believe that people weren't aware of it before then, you know, before a decade ago or whatever, 15 years ago, 16 years ago. Because, you know, when I was at university in the 70s, early 70s, and there were all the predictions that we're now seeing happening were being made then, and probably if not before, you know. So, yeah. So more recently, I was thinking, like, how do our teachers engage with this topic? I mean, we can look at, you know, can sort of cite things from the Buddhist teachings from Lama Zopa, from His Holiness. So at the beginning of COVID, when Lama Zopa Rinpoche gave the transmission of Thubten Gyalpo's prayers, he gave transmission of 3 prayers. One about which is the one of our prayer-a-thon every Saturday, 24-hour prayer-a-thon, months and nuns of light night. As Rinpoche said, until the pandemic declines, to continue on every Saturday, right? And so, which was interesting because we had no idea how long they would be. Look at us now, you know, we just locked out every other state of Australia. Nobody's allowed to. And we don't have to wear masks now from 6 p.m, but you work that out because nobody's wearing one, including me. So, Lama Zopa Rinpoche gave the transmission of the prayer for the, you know, Thubten Gyalpo prayer for, you know, pacifying pandemic. It's been like 76, 77 weeks now, every week, right? All around the world. At the same time, Rinpoche gave 2 others. One was from Thubten Gyalpo transmission, prevention of famine. And the other one about conflict in the world. Prevention of, you know, because, and Rinpoche said, first we have pandemic, then we have famine, then we have conflict. And then His Holiness came along and said, was talking and has talked very, very strongly about the environment, particularly in recent years, because it's an urgent time. It's really, we're at crisis, we're at emergency. And His Holiness came along, and I remember one talk, and we were like, did you hear what His Holiness just said? His Holiness sort of reiterating what Rinpoche was saying, like saying a similar thing, and said, no, the conflict one, I think we've done that one, which was a little bit reassuring, because what Lama Zopa Rinpoche had said was conflict at every level of society, from our interpersonal relationships up to global, everybody. But it was interesting that His Holiness said that. But then he said, on the back of the pandemic, he said, we're coming to the end of a, you know, eon of you know, coming towards the destruction of this world system, coinciding with, you know, end of an eon. You know. And he said there'll be fire and then wind, and then the earth will disappear. Like go up in smoke, basically, or, you know, whatever. So that the end of this world system. And he said, if we work on our minds and change our mental attitude, then we can be in the Pure Land and we can see that destruction. And this not as a sense of indifference, but to be able to be of benefit, you know. So of course it comes down to his mind. So our minds, but, you know, sort of meantime, but it was interesting, His Holiness said, and, you know, maybe we've got about 30 or 40 years. That was pretty frightening. Beyond frightening. It's like, did you hear that? Yeah. Now, the next time His Holiness spoke, or maybe he had some scientific input at that point, and he said 1 or 2 centuries, and you sort of relax. Oh, we've got a couple of centuries. I won't be here. Don't worry about it. You know. So this is the complacency, just like when I was, you know, at uni, and the predictions were being made. But unless it's right there or right here, we're feeling it. What do we do? So, you know, we saw in 2020 His Holiness book launched, Our Only Home, which is, you know, saying, what are we doing looking after? This is our only home, this planet, it's our world system. What are we doing to take care of it? Now, this wasn't a new thing, messaging for His Holiness, because if you look at His Holiness messaging around universal responsibility and the environment, like we're talking decades and decades and decades of this. So, you know, it's up to, yeah. And so also, if we think about, I mean, if the Buddha, if Shakyamuni Buddha, as we know the historical Buddha was, were alive today, it'd certainly be campaigning, might be out there as an activist on the street. I mean, I was thinking about Osel as a, you know, reincarnate high lama, and what is he doing? So at the beginning of, end of 2019, he established the Global Tree Initiative with the vision to offer for His Holiness, what's the best offering I can make to His Holiness? 100,000 trees on his next birthday, 86th birthday, the next year, because COVID got in the way. So, but just that sort of bringing in different ways, different means of action of bringing environmental issues to the fore in ways that we can. So you can say, oh, well, I don't have the pulling power of Osel. No, not necessarily. But, you know, His Holiness says, well, I'm doing my little bit, you know, that, you know, he says, well, you know, when I brush my teeth, I turn the tap off and save a bit of water. You know, just, they're the little things we can do, you know. So I wanted to make reference to the Buddha because it's all there. Surprise. So, Golden Light Sutra. Lama Zopa Rinpoche says, I'll just read a bit from Rinpoche. This text increases success, and especially for leaders like kings or presidents, it brings success to their guiding in virtue, the path to happiness. In whichever country this is taught, the whole country will benefit. The king of the country will not be attacked, and disease will be eliminated. Everyone will be happy, and the country will become harmonious and without quarrels. And indeed, if we look at Osel's the vision statement for the Global Tree Initiative, it says, together we can create a conscious, wise, warm-hearted world of peace where people respect and live in harmony with animals and the environment. It's what we all say, we all want, but that sounds nice. But it's doing it, isn't it? Taking the action. So, yeah. The king will give religious freedoms. The king is the leader of the land, right? Whoever is a political leader, whether it be a prime minister or president or whoever. And we'll always, yeah, no. It's especially good to read these in places where there is a lot of fighting. As well, there will be prosperity and rains will come at the right time. Right. So when I read about the fighting, when we first started, me and this other nun were reciting this in Sydney many years ago, and the Buddhist Council was, we were having conversations about having a Buddhist chaplain in the armed forces, right? Now it's happening, the training program's happening with ADF, and so it's a very rigorous training. So it's having the Buddhists, because, you know, anyway, from past experience of Buddhists, they realised, ADF realised that they weren't catering for Buddhists, and maybe others as well, I'm not sure. And so me and this nun said, oh, great, you know, Afghanistan, we could be there with our hard hats and our bulletproof vests, standing there in our hobnail boots and recite Sangata Sutra. I mean, no, Golden Light Sutra. I mean, the image was exciting to our minds, but of course, as monastics, we weren't going to be the ones going. So there you go. You've got lay people. But this is what the Buddha said in that light, in that Golden Light teaching, Golden Light Sutra. And this is the chapter on the, it's called the chapter, I mean, excuse the language, I mean, in terms of language of the time, world treatise entitled The Inviolable Commitments of Divine Kings. So this is, you've got to commit yourself to this. If you're a world leader, let's say it like that. Say it like that. So the warnings, I mean, this is just one example of the warnings from the Buddha. When a king does not perform the function for which kingship has been bestowed, he demolishes his own realm, as the elephant lord destroys a lotus pond. Unfavorable winds will arise, unfavorable rains will fall, the sun and moon will be unfavorable, and likewise the planets and stars. Where a king is negligent, famine will descend upon the land, seeds, crops, flowers, and fruit will cease to grow and flourish. Mayhem will prevail in the land, by weapons too it will give way. Covert acts, strife, and disease of every variety will come to be. When those devoid of virtue become venerated in the land, whose law-abiding and virtuous ones, those law-abiding and virtuous ones will also be victimized. When the corrupt are esteemed and the sublime dishonored, three things, famine, thunderbolts, and death will occur in that place. Fruits and crops will have no taste and no potency thereafter. Being sickened with disease will fill those regions completely. Large sweet fruit will shrivel, become bitter and sharp. Play, humour and fun, the pleasure of previous times now rife with infinite delusion, will lose the touch of joy. Misfortunes such as these in their regions will come to be. You could go on. It's there in the Buddha's teachings, predicting. It's all a dependent arising, dependent on, you know, the medicine Buddhas made that vow in the times of great degeneration, which is these times, we will be there. The degeneration of, you know, more and more illnesses in terms of physical illness, mental illness. We're seeing that in the world. The environment, lifespan going down. We haven't come to that point yet, but it's predicted down to 10 years old and so forth, and more conflict. So the degeneration of the mind and the body. And this is, you know, happening in the world. So, you know, we frequently recite, you know, from that dedication chapter from Bodhisattva's Way of Life. I mean, if we think about it, may all beings everywhere, flayed by sufferings of body and mind, attain an ocean of happiness and joy by virtue of my merits. May no living creature suffer, commit evil, or ever fall ill. May no one be afraid or belittled with a mind weighed down by depression. May the naked find clothing, the hungry find food. May the thirsty find water and delicious drinks. May there be timely rains and bountiful harvests. May all medicines be effective and wholesome prayers bear fruit. May all who are sick and ill quickly be freed from their ailments, whatever diseases there are in the world. May they never occur again. May the frightened cease to be afraid and those bound be freed. May the powerless find power, and may people think of benefiting each other. So this was an 8th century plea by Shantideva to humanity. And here we are so many centuries on. So I guess it's like, what am I doing to make this a reality, to do that? You know, it's all very well to say the prayers, as His Holiness says. Very nice to say the prayers, but it's just not enough. We have to actually take action. And, you know, His Holiness has talked forever about taking on universal responsibility, and how that works for my mind is to think, if not me, who? If not now, when? Like, oh, somebody should. Well, as soon as I think somebody should, I've got to think, what can I do? What's my capacity? What am I contributing? Whether it be, you know, as I mentioned, His Holiness, you know, saying when he brushes his teeth and he saves the water, saves a bit of water, okay, or however much water. But actually, you know, it's that thing of, you know, we have to live simply so others can simply live. And really think about that, you know, those my monastic sister and myself. As monastics, you know, we've simplified some things externally, you can tell, you know. We don't have a whole, you know, wardrobe of fashions. We've reduced that. Hair, you know, no longer having all the sort of different colours and hairstyles and whatever, and all the stuff they put in it and whatever, polluting and so forth. And indeed, we have those things like, you know, don't overindulge, don't overeat, just to sustain yourself, and, you know, short showers, keep it simple. In, you know, just really see what is my environmental footprint, what impact am I having in terms of the environment. It's quite frightening because it's sort of like, okay, I've done those things to some extent, I still overconsume. Think about it, I still over-contribute to that because of not being conscientious. You know. When I was 2008, end of 2008, that was, no, yeah. Anyway, towards the end of 2008, I was in Rinpoche's house in Aptos in California. I was delighted to be able to go there and do the water bowl offerings. I jumped for joy when I heard I was going there, which was 5 hours a day, 3 nuns, taking the buckets around every surface, you know, making water bowl. It was like in heaven. It was fairly cold heaven, just saying, because it was winter, but no heaters, please. We're saving electricity. And, you know, my job, Thursdays was my cooking day. And the shopping happened, must have been Friday, because it was like, you know, when they have those cooking shows and it's like, what can you do with the 3 ingredients in your... I wish I watched a few of those because it was like, okay, we're down to potatoes and this. And anyway, there was always a meal because it was, you know, your turn to cook for everyone. There was always a meal, but to keep it simple, right? And, you know, washing, like using the washing machine. So we had to, when we could wash, I don't know if we had a advice, instruction about when, how often we could use the washing machine, but when we did, had to be after, I think it was 8 p.m, because that's when it was at a cheaper rate. So the whole consciousness around Rinpoche's house there was about being frugal, which is a lovely way for a monastic to live, about being frugal. But, you know, don't have to be monastic to live a simple life, you know. And what is really, I find, heartening in the world today is there's much more talk about that, about decluttering, about using less, and, you know, there's a lot more, despite the fact we were talking about it in the 70s and probably before that and before that and before that. There's a lot more, there is environmental awareness, because why? We don't have to be told it's warming up. We're right here in the thick of it, right? I saw a thing on the news, regional news, just yesterday or the day before, I think regional WA news, and it was talking about that prediction of global warming, that by 2050, in our trajectory that we're going now, we're going to be 2 to 4 degrees warmer, right? So how much heat can we tolerate is what, you know, my question to myself, how much heat can we tolerate? I mean, as Buddhists, we say, oh yes, the suffering of beings in the hot hells and so forth, but it's like it's someone else and somewhere else, you know. The hell realms are not a different place. They're a state of mind and a state of, you know, physical experience and bodily experience. So I think we're creating those hell realms right here, right now on Earth. True, right? Anyway, so thinking about that. So as His Holiness said, saving the environment is our collective duty. With each passing day, climate change is causing Pacific islands to disappear into the sea. And it's interesting, this sort of sense of connection or dependent arising that, you know, when I first heard about the sinking of the Pacific Island, and I'd done some work in the Pacific years ago in the job I had. And it's just like, but I know people there. And so it's easy if you don't know people there, that you don't feel that connection, but we're all globally connected. So this is, you know, it's like putting the Buddha's teachings into practice. So, you know, and then the extinction of species that we're seeing at an alarming rate, which actually that phenomena in the Pacific Ocean, you know, that sort of butterfly effect of the sort of chaos theory, is impacting Europe. So in other words, we can't deny climate change. I mean, we know that. I mean, just ask any farmer. And interestingly, the Buddha spoke to farmers, right? That was the audience. The Buddha used the analogies of the environment. You know, his mother gave birth to him under a tree, and he taught under trees, and he used the analogies of, you know, the field of merit and the and using the seeds and growth and so forth, because it was connecting with being in harmony with the environment. I mean, I guess we can translate that in different ways for our mind. So when I was in Bunbury just now, I was given a calendar for this year, and it was, I don't know if anybody else got that calendar, the 12 Great Rivers of Tibet. So it's an international Tibet campaign. So they gave me that. And you think about the great rivers of Tibet, and we have this idea of this sort of pristine environment and so forth. It's getting destroyed. Mining and the damming of mega dams of the rivers. And that's the whole source of water, without which we're not going to live much, you know, a few days, for Asia. It's critical, right? It's drying up, you know. At Chenrezig Institute, Geshe Sultram was speaking about this, that he grew up in a rural area, you know, he was in a farming family. And he said the river in there has become a trickle, has become a stream because of the mining and so forth. So this is really, really critical. And it was sort of looking at these rivers and going, that's going to be gone, that's going to be gone, that's going to be gone. So we have to use whatever sense of faith in interdependence and so forth to actually help heal the environment. Thubten Chokyi Rinpoche. Now, I'm not sure whether it was His Holiness who requested, or anyway, it was requested by one of Abba Hailam to go to Antarctica. This was in, I think it was 2006 or 2007. So he went to Antarctica, and it was on a sort of Russian vessel, and I saw a film clip of it, him going, and it was to do practices to help realign the planet, to help bring the elements into balance. Because if you think about it, if we want to talk about global interdependence, the elements in the environment and the elements in our body, like where's the end of me and the beginning of the external environment? You know, I'm sweating out liquid, you know, so the water element, or I bring it in when I drink and so forth. You know, many examples, I can give analogies. And then the air we breathe, we know about that because we want to have clean, pure, everything air. We're so interdependent, all the elements in our body and the external elements. So anyway, so Thubten Chokyi was there to, and so it was this Russian, it wasn't, it was a sort of cruise ship. So they were, not a cruise ship, freight, a more freight one. But there must have been a group of people there doing a tourist thing, because they got there when they, I mean, do you dock on an iceberg? When they pulled up, when they disembarked, And so there was a group of tourists and who were going in that direction. And then Chokyi Tencho Rinpoche and the whole entourage was going in this direction, and they all came and joined. And he was doing practices in the water and in the ground, in the water, and also he did practices. And it's too late now anyway. Off the side of the ship, because you're not supposed to put things into the water, but some Buddha statues went down, just saying. Who knows what practices he was doing, but this is, you know, they talk about these different cities, these different powers that the lamas can have. And I remember many years ago, people saying, you know, when we request lamas coming to Australia at the time, we should be requesting them to do something for the environment, right? We don't think, but we can think that, because it's possible, you know. Of course, we can't rely on them, you know, at the moment we can't rely on them even being able to get here, especially to WA, just saying. But, you know, with the COVID thing's been a real interesting thing environmentally too. I don't know if anyone saw, I was quite impressed by Julia Roberts. Did a film clip early on Facebook, and it was the voice of Mother Earth. It was so powerful, I thought. She was saying, I am Mother Earth. I sent you cataclysm after cataclysm. I sent you landslides and volcanic eruptions and floods, and you didn't listen and you didn't listen and didn't listen. And it was basically like, now I can breathe, now listen. Because we did have that period, you know, of all of a sudden we weren't flying around the world. All of a sudden we were stuck at home. I mean, globally, there's phenomena. And the animals were somewhat, the bush turkeys at Chinrezig were freaking out because there's food, their free food source from the cafe, which is not the most healthy one for them. For us, yes, very healthy. Had dried up, and so they had to forage for themselves. Oh, fancy that. There's plenty to forage for, no problem. But you saw the flourishing. You saw wildlife gathering in places that humans had taken over, and all of a sudden it was their sanctuary. You know, it was wonderful, very inspiring. But just seeing the lungs, you know, how it was presented, the lungs of the earth. I can breathe, I can breathe, I can breathe. That's sort of finding environmental balance. Yes, you could see Tibet. You could see the Himalayas. You know, people who lived right there, and they said, well, I'm told it's there, but I haven't never seen it, you know. All of a sudden, the air cleared. And Lama Yeshe was at least one person who predicted a time would come when we can't fly. Could we imagine that in the 80s? I wonder what he's talking about. Well, yeah.
But not many.
But, I mean, flights ground to a stop. Airlines went out of business, you know. Yeah. So, you know, our lamas are light years ahead of us. You know, we say that if Buddha was alive today, he'd be an environmental activist. His Holiness the Dalai Lama, Buddha of compassion, and he is so vocal about this. He's so behind the young people. I remember at the, you know, beginning of this century, and His Holiness was saying, anyone over 30, you are so last century, including himself. You are so last century. This century belongs to those under 30. And so then you can see with people like Greta Thunberg, he said she's so young, but she's so committed. It's like, go girl, you know. And not just her, many others. And you see that energy and conviction that is coming, because it's like, now the earth's really stuffed. We haven't got long to go, you know, this generation. So, yeah, so His Holiness is really behind that. Amazing. He says, despite being very young, her sense of universal responsibility is wonderful. I support her. Fridays for the Future movement. So that's where this title came from, Fridays for the Future. And so that idea with that was a coming together of, 500 or whatever activists from 38 different countries, which fed into also the COP26 meeting they just had. So to create, the mission, to create a safe pathway to keep global temperature rise below 1.5 degrees. We know we had the black summer bushfires, we haven't forgotten those. But look here, just before Christmas, we already had bushfires here early, right? Look at the records of, so many hot days. Was it 4 days sequentially in December of 40 or, around 40? Yeah. Yes, well, I was just like, I want to ask the people in Marble Bar how you survive every day being 46, 47, 48, because I want to know that. I remember once in my life, that I can remember, that it was 49 degrees. And I tell you, you couldn't be outside. I was inside and I was lying down. There was a fan here and a fan here. And I'm like, I'm not coping. So, it's like we are going to have to learn to live with this because it's happening. It is happening. But, ensuring, listening to their mission, listening to the best united science currently available and unite behind the science and follow the Paris Agreement. I don't know, has that been modified and changed or whatever? Ensure climate justice and equity for everyone. So with COVID, like in the Northern Territory, just recently in the town, a couple of towns that were in lockdown with Aboriginal communities, they didn't have aircon. They were in their house in 40 plus heat and you stay at home. Oh, excuse me. Would you do that? So, yeah. So as his Holiness says, these young people, it's like they are our only hope really for the future. And it's because they can see this is my lifetime and this is, there's of course the anger, the Extinction Rebellion of, we're all going to, it's real. And so this is just sort of picking up on a few initiatives that I've been inspired by. So we have the CCARE, the Centre for Compassion and Altruism Research at Stanford University. So that has come out, a lot of the dialogues of Mind and Life with His Holiness the Dalai Lama and stuff like that. They have the whole CCARE training. Those trainings I think have happened in Australia. Well, and I know they've happened in Australia as well. But what they did in November was that they collaborated with the University of Edinburgh and Global Compassion Initiative there, and held an event alongside that COP26. Was that in November or around about? Must have been around about then. So the title was this event, Realizing a Compassionate Planet. So, sort of bringing together a whole lot of activism and so forth, bringing the science of compassion into the dialogue around the environment. So really, using that as action in the world. And it was alongside the UN Climate Change Conference, COP26, and so the idea of that was tapping into those, those engaged around the world who have the strongest motivation for change for humanity. Now, my history, part of my history was, I worked when I was working for, originally it was Australian Freedom from Hunger campaign that I was working for, which was set up through the WHO. And then that became under the umbrella of Community Aid Abroad, now Oxfam in Australia. And we had No, she wasn't. She was deputy chair. Don Johnston's chair. She went to the UNCED conference in Brazil and UN conference on environment and development, and she, in the NGO forum, because that runs along parallel. And she came back when she was reporting back. So she, just part of her connection, her and Bob Brown shared a house in Tassie, and, you know, sort of Judith Hunt. Yeah. And so she went, and she came back and she said, it was really interesting, you know, this one occasion in the room where everyone's agreeing we've got to do something about the environment and so forth, except for the US. And the US delegation had been sent there with this was to the NGO forum, not to the main event, with the express thing of your party line, the American consumer lifestyle is not up for negotiation, quote unquote. That's horrifying. It's horrifying because it's about greed. It's totally about greed. And she said these poor American, well, she wasn't feeling sorry for them too much, but she said they were ostracized. They were in a corner and they were ringing, you know, the White House or whoever they rang. People aren't happy with us. We've got to change our position. Don't change your position. We've got to change our position, you know, this whole thing. So that was in the early 90s. And so we're stuck with this still now. So, yeah. You know, we've got to think about those of us who have children or grandchildren, what kind of world are they going to grow up in? If you're thinking, nobody here's thinking of having children, I'm just looking around. Huh? I said probably nobody here's thinking of having children.
Too late,
I mean, I remember when I was young, my mother said, thanks, Mum, for saying that, because, you know, for a while there was a pressure to have kids. But then my siblings had children, then there was no pressure anymore. She said, don't have kids, don't bring any more kids into this world. I went, okay, that suits me. But what are things going to be like, should we survive into the 22nd, let alone 23rd century? Well, let's just look at what we have, and is it, you know, it is really like, is it too late? You know, so, you know, I guess the thing that, you know, has been on my mind, what am I doing? You know, we do the, okay, we can be like the Dalai Lama, start at home. What can I do to reduce, you know, to actually, if it is warming up, I find it a useful practice myself to see just how much comfort my mind tells me I need and how much I actually need. You know, it's like, we have a lot of comfort in the world. Do we need all of that? A lot of stuff in the world. Do we need all of that? And what can I reduce? You know, they say out of the, what is it? Reduce, recycle, reuse. That what we're very good at doing is recycling. In other words, taking somebody else's problem. And I think now, was it China who said to us they didn't want Australia's stuff anymore, rubbish anymore? Someone, yeah. Yeah, dump it onto, I mean, we'll be doing that for a very long time. So, but to actually reduce will make a profound impact. You know, one of the things I thought, I haven't been there yet, I haven't been to many of these places yet, many cafes yet, been to this one, and Secret Garden, and we went to that Tali place. Anyway, there's a, you might know, I had to look it up again, I couldn't remember the name, Ruby Girl in Como. Has anyone been there? So it's run by people with disability, which is what first caught my attention. But apparently you can take there pretty much everything for recycling. But I want to go down and check before I bring a truckload of stuff down and say, oh, apparently you're going to recycle, you know. So when I was at Chenrezig Institute, we sort of were having a conversation about the lids for kids. you know, the lids that you can't put in the recycle bin because they're not the right number. And so you put here. Because even on the recycling, I look at that as a Dharma center, and I'm not saying what anyone puts in recycling here because I haven't checked the recycling bin, but at Chenrezig, I'm thinking, we were in the back of the gompa, because that's where I'd noticed we had the regular bin, the recycle bin, and the red bin, red cycle, you know, soft plastics. I spent a lot of time, and maybe other people did too, sorting things out from there into there and there into there. And I thought, we are Dharma practitioners. We are intelligent. We are caring people. We care for the environment. We care for each other. And we can't get this right. And so then I have to say, well, and not to be critical of anyone, but just how difficult it is to do the simplest little things, you know, any one of us, to be mindful. So any one of those is sort of like a practice to take on board. You know, we at Vajrayana Institute prior to that, you know, we started having well, what are we going to do around here in terms of our universal responsibility? We decided we weren't going to have any eggs from caged hens. You know, we were going to have, you know, organic, free range, and you can get a certificate if you're doing that. So we had the certificate up on the fridge, and at some point I took it down. I thought, I can't say that everybody in this house is doing that. We've got to take it down. It's not true. We can't tell a lie and say we are, right? Because things are like, there's the initial burst to do something individually or collectively, and then it sort of gets a bit murky. I mean, all of it. I mean, it's human nature. We seem to be like that. But, you know, this, anyway, so at least if we can work on our reduce, recycle, reuse. And then, you know, we've got centers like in California, Land of Medicine Buddha. Okay, they're in the redland forest and so forth, a redwood forest and so forth. You go there and they've signed up to the environmental agreement with California. They've got the gold star tick of approval. They run, well, I don't know if it's still running, COVID, but they have, you know, sort of retreat rooms and so forth. It's one like a sort of mini motel. You go in and you've got your little soap and your this and your that and whatever. It's all eco-sustainable, not using this, not using that. So they've got their certificates. So then a message as a Dharma center saying, this is what we're doing as our contribution to saving this environment. Okay, they're in California, there's a lot more, whatever. So I think, you know, I'm inspired by, because I'm incapable of small actions. You know, one of the nuns at Chenrezig Institute, and passionate about the environment, not out there with placards or so forth, but in her own area of control, her cabin. And so, okay, I'm not going to use plastic, you know, and so, or reduce the use of plastic. And so getting the, you know, the tiffin things, the metal ones and so forth, like to get on the trains in India, or used to. Using things that we can reuse, and even the scour. I stayed in a hut full of scouring brushes that are the eco-friendly, and they actually last quite a bit of time. So, you know, when we see those pictures of the fish in the ocean full of little bits of plastic, and it's just like, I'm trying to reduce the amount that I'm contributing to that, but am I doing that all the time? I'm not trying all the time to do that. And I think there's just so much we can, it's just bringing mindfulness to it, I think, bringing awareness to it. It's not necessarily that I'm, you know, like in the 70s, 60s, 70s, I was, you know, movement against uranium mining, Friends of the Earth, this and that, you know, whatever. And I'm not engaging in those ways anymore, but it doesn't mean I have to give up the passion for that, you know. And so It's like, how am I really living the Mahayana Dharma in my caring for others? So I just thought it'd be interesting conversation for us to contemplate ourselves. If anybody wants to contribute, your Jude.
Sorry,
Yeah.
seems to really use like energy of
She uses the energy of anger. It's like it's transforming. Like if we talk about Lojong thought transformation, actually she's taking that energy and she's making it something that is powerful, like taking out the negative side and making it something very passionate.
Because I've seen so many activists sitting,
Yes.
getting like burnt out by the frustration.
Yes, because it's also like having myself also been part of this, you know, I was never part of the smashing up things and stuff like that, but I was on demos where that happened. And, you know, it can be very draining also if you're not actually engaging in something meaningful or seeing a meaningful result, or maybe not the ultimate result because you're not, but step by step. And because, you know, what happens when you get angry and what happens when the adrenaline goes? And then you get tired. It feels bad. So it has to be that invigorating. And that's, she's channeling that energy, transforming it in a positive direction, right? It's very, very powerful. And it's phenomenal, really. Very inspiring. And so, okay, she's one person, but there are many people, and she's inspiring to her generation. Just like, you know, you look at Osel, he's appealing to his generation, not to us, but to, well, he's appealing to us too, but he's appealing to his generation. And, you know, he's in his mid-30s. So he's showing his holiness is, well, has a broad appeal to the whole world, you know. And so to use that space to whatever level of our capacity, you know, what we can do. It's not as a guilt trip. It's like, but what can I do that is not draining and oh, it's too hard, you know, oh, we did that, you know, decades ago. Well, the Buddha did countless great eons. Are we going to give up in a few decades? Because, you know, so well, I think the capturing their energy is remembering our Mahayana motivation and thinking it's for the greater good. I always find, you know, I always think of, you know, because Lama Zopa Rinpoche, Zopa means patience. And I think Rinpoche has infinite patience. These lamas have infinite patience. It's one of the qualities. It's not a complacency, but it's a preparation and perseverance that I'm in here for the long haul, you know, and whatever I can do. And I'm not perfect, you know. Oh, yes. Yeah, I want to reduce the plastic, but do I use plastic? Absolutely, yes. But, you know, remind myself, this is what I want to do. I want to reduce it as much as possible. And, you know, I look like somebody who's reduced a lot. Not in the weight department, unfortunately, but that doesn't seem to, you know, I was talking to my brother and he was talking about, because I had their meal, and he was talking about needing one and he says, oh, that's nothing. Yeah. But, you know, I guess also, you know, I was thinking about, you know, with Thubten Chokyi and going to Antarctica and trying to realign the elements, and we don't know what he did achieve. It could have been worse already. But not only him, because you think about, you know, it says the cities of something like rain is an easy one to have. But I think about our Indigenous brothers, sisters, the rainmakers and the whole lineage of that in this very country, you know, we have that. So, okay, that's not my skill set, but it can be, you know, what I do physically, but also what message I give by what I'm doing, you know, because we need each other. We're doing it for each other, for the environment. So I think it's like, you know, follow their example of just So it's not giving up, but it's also just, as Lamas would say, rejoice, rejoice, rejoice in what you are doing, what we are doing. Because we like to beat ourselves up and others as well. And that is only ever debilitating. That is only ever divisive. That's a creator of disharmony. So how am I promoting harmony? You know, so if we sort of go, I've got to have that harmony within myself, and just like, you put that in the right recycle bin. Very good. We have to encourage ourselves, enthuse ourselves in the tiniest little steps, and then our power to do more and more. Like everything in the Dharma becomes greater. And we do that with a Mahayana motivation. We say, this is my Dharma practice. My Dharma practice is doing this. You know, why not? Whatever it takes.
The 10 cents that you get in cans now is helping a lot.
Where do you
Just
get
go
that?
to the rubbish. Take them
People
back.
actually walk up and down my street on the dim day.
Oh, yeah.
Collecting in poles.
Well, here's the thing.
Right.
Here's the thing. I'm just throwing it out there, new kid on the block. At Chenrezig Institute, there's a bin in the cafe for those 10 centres. I used to gather mine together and take them down there. And then once it was full, the bin, Karuna Hospice would come and they'd take it to the depot, and they would get the donation from that. Why not do the same here? We can have a bin here. And it raises environmental awareness about that for folks, as well as, you know, you're not doing it to generate great income. It's not going to be great income, but it's, you know, I'm just suggesting.
If we have a bin in a legacy, like
Yeah.
our own bin,
Yeah.
bin, and I think the full bin, it can raise us about 10,000. 10,000 better than nothing. In fact, and my very old ladies, that took me to shame. I go down there and they've got new bags and they bring in, you know, the little plastic things that are on the end of the bread. You know, they bring all those.
Yes,
And
the
somebody
bread
brings-
tags,
takes them
you can
somewhere.
take them
They
to
use
the
little
cafe as well.
stamps.
That's why I want to
Yeah.
go there, because I collected all these
Yeah.
bread tags.
Yeah. They're amazing.
And I couldn't find where I could take them. And see what happened in the in 2020, you know, with the COVID thing, suddenly the Lids for Kids people weren't taking things and the bread tag people weren't taking things, but now it's all back on.
Back on again.
So, well, maybe it was never off in WA, but the rest
No,
of the
the
country.
big plastic lids were off for a while.
Yeah,
Hey, girls,
but you can
yeah,
take them.
the old girls, they collect all these things.
Yes.
And then they get taken, they all get collected by one person and then she takes them. They fascinate me.
I reckon we can do these things, you know. They're little things because it creates awareness in others as well. So, yeah. It creates awareness. We can do that here, we can have it here. Bring your lids, bring you this, bring you that. We'll go down to Ruby Cafe. Meantime, check it out. Has anyone been there, Ruby Girl? Anyway, I'm not trying to plug them. It's just that I want to go there in Congo. Ruby Girl. Yeah. And apparently they say, we've got recycle this and recycle that and recycle. I'm going to go and see first, do a recce. Let's do it as a group. Whoever wants to come. And we go there and we have a look at what they've got and say, we can help with that. Yeah, why not? Simple act.
As you said, it's awareness.
It's awareness. It's awareness. You know, there's a lot of stuff we can't do, but these things we can. These things we can. So I think, you know, anyway, that's what I have to say. That's for tonight. And so now we've got a plan. We're going to go to Ruby Girl. And we can I bring a truckload with me? Or if there are, you know, for your women who do that as well, where they take stuff.
The biggest, and I think there's a lot of stuff around that Kennedy area where they can drop things off.
Right.
Because I know my friend knows how to go.
Yeah, it's just knowing where to drop things off.
Plastic tops.
Yeah.
And people stop taking those, and she get thousands of them.
Yes.
Anyway, I found
Yeah.
some.
Yeah.
My girls collect stamps too. They bring all their old stamps in.
Yeah.
And then somebody takes them and resells them.
Yeah. Well,
And she's made
when
about
I was-
45,000
I mean, this
old
was-
stamps.
this is the interesting thing as a child, you know, I sort of grew up, and it was partly out of, we weren't a wealthy country, a family. We're a wealthy country. We weren't a wealthy family. And this is the thing, you know, often when people, it's the people with more wealth who are overconsumed. Because, you know, the poorer you are, the less likely you are to, because the less you can have. But we would go to the bulk health food shop, and I'm talking about the early 60s. We'd go there, we'd walk everywhere, you'd shop.
Ride your bike.
Yeah, ride your bike, on your bike, and, you know, take our jars and all of this. And, you know, my mother persisted throughout her whole life of really, unless people gave her things, she had bought whatever type of crockery, cutlery to last, and it just lasted. And it wasn't a sense of, oh, I've got to get a new one because I've got what works, you know. So it's a mindset thing really too, isn't it? Anyway, we've got a plan of action. We're going to do something. I'm so happy about that.
Saying about heat.
Heat, yes.
We were talking about it this morning. Like, I mean, I swim every day, you know, 6 and 7 o'clock. The other day we were standing up at 7. The sun was that hot.
Yes, it is.
It was burning
7:30. Yeah.
skin. You could feel it.
Yeah.
At 7:30, it's not. And the water was 23.8 degrees.
Yeah.
And they reckon in Sydney, the East Coast is 25.
25 degrees, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, look at the whole coral. Yeah. Yeah. All right. So so good. We've got some action. That's a brilliant outcome. And so next time, not sure what's going to be next time. So it'll be February sometime. Yeah. No, what topic will be. So also just spread the word that it'll all be socially engaged topics. I've got topics that I'm passionate about, but other people might have ones they're passionate about, and it'll only be every 6 weeks. So we're going to have different topics. So you'll get to know my topics. But I think environment's the most critical one for us all, because I mean, sort of without that, we're gone.
Back up in the 42 days, I don't think they're like 45, 46. But they're having it. Further up, yes. But even today at 30, it was 40. It was 37. It didn't make more. The sea breeze hadn't come in when I left home. Come here with 6. This place is very hot. I was amazed when we came back.